What's up? Dr. Chad with Energy Physio. Talking about diagnosis today. We see a lot of people who have already tried and failed physical therapy, uh, chiropractics, meds, injections, some surgeries, the whole bit. And so we see some really common threads in all of these, especially as it relates to medical diagnosis, as it relates to MRI, CT scans, X-rays. We're seeing the same things over and over and over and over, and we're solving these problems in the same way over and over and over. So, in spite of diagnosis and in spite of whatever the image looks like or image report says, we're following this pretty simple framework that we use to get to a better understanding of what is going on in your body that is creating pain, because the diagnosis you have is wrong. And we classify wrong being as two things, and it's usually both. It is either incomplete or it's incorrect, or a combination of both. Okay, so you cannot correctly treat an incorrect diagnosis. It's impossible. Diagnosis dictates where the treatment goes. And if you have the wrong diagnosis, you're going to get the wrong treatment. The other problem is if your diagnosis is incomplete, you're not going to get a complete solution, because the completeness of a diagnosis also controls the completeness of the solution. If you're missing a bunch of pieces, you're unaware of a bunch of pieces that you need to solve, then you're not going to get the complete solution that you need to get pain-free. And we just see this over and over and over when people come to us both in person and online. Is they've got a very narrowly defined diagnosis from a medical professional. There's not necessarily anything wrong with that. But when we're talking about root cause pain relief, that diagnosis is not helpful. Okay. A diagnosis of low back pain, most medical diagnoses just relabel your pain with some fancier term. You go into the doctor and say, "Doc, my low back hurts." And they write you a prescription for physical therapy and it says low back pain. That's not even fancier words. It just restated what you had and sent you somewhere else. Waste of time, waste of money. But when they do tendonitis, tendinosis, disc herniation, these are just relabelings of the pain problem you're having. But what happens is, if you have a diagnosis of disc herniation, and you have an image that shows you have a disc herniation, a disc bulge, something of that nature, and you take that to some other professional, they're going to start giving you all of their canned solutions for that diagnosis. Okay. And so if you have a disc herniation, you're going to get, cobras and extension exercises and all these different things that work for disc herniations. The problem becomes when your pain doesn't go away and you're doing all the right things for a disc herniation, people think that the provider doesn't know what they're doing, or it's just not working for you. That's not correct. The problem is the disc is not the reason you're having pain. And this is true all the time. Pain is never where the problem is. Okay. The actual problem lives elsewhere. The pain is just where the stress is showing up to the highest degree. Turns out it shows up in the spine more frequently than anywhere else. And the reason for that is the spine is the most uniquely suited position in the body to help you change your center of gravity and your movement so you don't fall over. Your body is very keen on staying upright. And so the spine is 33 joints stacked on top of each other. So it just has a lot of freedom to flex and bend and maneuver and change your body position to accommodate for all your other joints that aren't working like they should, right? So the stiff ankle is at the root of all evil for pain. You could solve more pain in more areas of the body just solving ankle stiffness than probably anything else, but nobody's looking at your ankle when you have low back pain. And this is a big problem, okay? Because in the context of functional movement, and now really hear me here, we're talking to weightlifters, runners, cyclists, people who are using their body in physical ways. You are not going to comprehensively solve your pain only looking where the pain's at. It's not going to happen. You're going to get temporary. You're going to get marginal. You're going to get little bits and pieces of results here and there, periods of time where you might feel okay, but it just keeps coming right back. And that is because the problem is not where the pain is. So if you have nerve root impingement, disc herniation, rotator cuff tendonitis, patellar tendonitis, all these different diagnoses that just confine the problem to this single area, only going to get as much results as you can possibly get by making little changes in that single area. What we have found is that if you make small changes in the other areas that don't hurt, then you can make a dramatic change in the area that does without touching it. But to do this, you have to go looking for all the things that don't work. And you also have to understand what is normal. Okay. What is, how much motion should you have in your ankle? How much motion should you have in your knee? Did you know that the knee bends and straightens, but also rotates? Nobody's looking at knee rotation, it seems like. How much rotation should you have in the hip? How much flexion should you have in the hip? How much extension should you have in the hip? These are all the things you need to know if you're going to move your body in some type of athletic way, or especially if you're going to put it under load of some kind and take reps and reps and reps. This is called fitness. And if your joints don't move as much as they should, then all that pain and stress is going to stack up somewhere. We see it stack up in the ankles. We see it stack up in the knees, the hips, the spine, the shoulders. For instance, sticky ankle will wreck the overhead squat, and it will tear the shoulder to pieces if you don't clean up your ankle range of motion. Just one way the ankle affects the shoulder in a very dramatic way. But what we need to get to is move away from medical diagnosis. Okay, here's our battle cry. Pain is not a medical problem. Pain is a movement problem. And if movement is the problem, movement can't be the medicine. We've got to get away from just arbitrarily prescribing movements for somebody who has pain. We got to move away from saying you have pain here because this muscle's weak. These things are myths. They are misconceptions, and they just aren't true. When a muscle appears weak, it is because it's attached to a joint that is not functioning well, okay, or a series of joints that aren't functioning well. And you can take that muscle that appears weak and then somehow turn it back on, and now it's magically strong. This is not a question of weakness. It's a question of the muscle is it attached to a joint that's not working well, and now it is experiencing what's called inhibition. The muscle just can't turn on to the power that it normally should because of the environment it's in. Strength requires time to rebuild, okay? Inhibition requires moments to turn it back on and uninhibit it, right? We do this all the time here in the clinic and with our clients online. It's not that hard to do. But the first thing you have to do is broaden your scope. You got to look at the full body. You have to zoom out. What is everything doing? In the context of functional movement, all your joints are working together to accomplish a certain task, okay? The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And if you don't understand how all those parts could potentially be feeding into the problem, then you're always going to have an incomplete diagnosis. Yes, you might have a disc herniation. That's fine. There's millions of Americans with herniations that have no pain. So we can't even take that at face value and assume that it's part of the pain that you're having, because it's likely that it's not. But what we do know with 100% certainty is that the source of pain and the root cause of pain are two distinct things. They're totally separate, okay? If your disc herniation, nerve root impingement, is the source of pain, how did it get there? How did that herniation occur? And when we start to break down how do herniations occur, by the way that the anatomy is knit together, by the way biomechanics function, and how compensation occurs in the body and disrupts anatomy and biomechanics and normal functioning of joints, that's how we get to root cause, okay? Source of pain might be some anatomical structure, but root cause of pain is, why is this anatomical structure taking so much stress to the point that it has been disrupted to the point of creating pain? So yes, you can do all the right things for a disc herniation, a nerve root impingement. You can do all the textbook things that research says. You do these things for a disc herniation and it pushes the disc back into the disc space. You can do all these types of movements to relieve pressure off of a nerve root. And in the moment, that is going to make you feel better. It's very, very predictable. But if you don't change the way your body is moving, that is creating the disc herniation or creating the nerve root impingement, then your body will not heal. It is going to stay stuck in this perpetual cycle of disruption, trying to put things back where they go, disruption, trying to put things back where they go. And that's why so many people get stuck in these chronic cycles of pain that go weeks, months, years. decades, we've seen it all, and we have made change in all of those. Okay. But it's because you just have to zoom out. How are they moving? Okay. This squat looks like this limited joint mobility that this person has. Stiff hips, stiff ankles, stiff shoulders looks like this squat. And if we're going to change how the person feels, we have to change the squat. But to change the squat, we have to understand the squat looks like it does because these joints are not moving like they should. Now we can go zoom in on these specific joints, create changes in those joints, create changes in the muscles around those joints, and then coach the new mobility back into the functional movement, make it look different. Because if you can make movement look different, you can make it feel different, right? And this is both good or bad. You can move the body in certain ways and make it feel worse, okay? You can move the body in the opposite ways of those and make it feel better. This is also very predictable. We've been reverse engineering movement for the last 8 years, understanding when somebody moves like this and we make them move like this, it doesn't hurt. And we think that's good. How we accomplish that is a little more comprehensive and complex. It's not rocket science, though. We just know, hey, when a movement looks like this, it feels bad. When it looks like this, it feels good. What are the barriers for this person right in front of us that makes their movement look like this? What barriers, what hurdles, what things do we need to knock over for them so that they can take their movement from looking like this and make it slowly start to look like this over here? And as we do that, we experience rapid pain relief. Making small changes in all the areas that don't hurt can make a huge change in the area that does, because it changes the way people move as a unit. Not change the way people move at this little local area that has pain in it, okay? Now, the interesting thing is when you look at joint mobility, at first glance, we have uncovered that that's not necessarily true. I committed years ago to no matter where the pain was, ankles, hips, knees, back, neck, doesn't matter. I'm going to check every single joint, okay? I start at the feet, work my way up. Okay. And now all of our docs here at Energy are doing the same thing. We start at the feet, work our way up, checking all the joints, checking all the unique motions that each joint has to see what's limited, what's sticky, what's stuck. It doesn't mean it hurts, but we have targets that we're looking for. Every joint should move a certain amount in each direction. And if it doesn't, we're going to flag that. This joint doesn't move enough. This joint is asymmetric as compared to the other side. It creates weird stuff in the body. And then once we move through and look at all that, what we noticed was that the common thread through everything is that pelvis was asymmetric. Leg length discrepancies, sacroiliac joint dysfunctions, hips are out of alignment. These are all the same, different names to describe the same thing. All of them mean the pelvis is not symmetrical from one side to the other. So this is the first asymmetry. What we found, though, is that when we check all the joints, start with the pelvis first, then recheck the joints, they all changed. An ankle that looked like they had no motion, now one has 10 and the other has 5. They're asymmetric. Now we know what problem we need to solve. The ankles look asymmetric, and then they flip-flop, okay? Well, if we would have taken that at first glance, we would have done a lot of mobility and like soft tissue work on a side that was fake stiff. It wasn't even real stiff, and we missed the actual problem. It's especially phenomenal in the shoulder. This is where our minds were blown to the highest degree, was that the shoulder would appear very stiff. We would do the pelvis, it would pick up more motion. When we actually work the first rib, it picks up even more motion. We work the opposite hip, work the joint capsule on the opposite hip, the shoulder picks up even more motion, to the point where 90% of the shoulders we're seeing, they're fake stiff. We can restore 100% of mobility and decrease pain to 0 without touching the shoulder joint itself. It really was mind-boggling. But what this showed us was that the keystone reset was not only a way to start really solving low back pain in a much better way very quickly, because we can identify that and solve it in a comprehensive way within minutes. But what it also showed us was that now we can get an accurate blueprint for what the joints are actually doing. We can bring the body to a baseline of mobility that allows us to zoom out, see what's going on, then zoom in on something that actually needs work. It's not fake stiff. It's not some like stiffness that is just showing up because of some other disruption in the body, we change the pelvis, which changes the entire fascial system, both above and below the pelvis. That's why it changes the mobility in all these joints. And now we can get to a better system of, okay, this is the true asymmetry. This is the true stiffness. Now, how do we start chipping away at these so that we can change the way somebody squats? We can change the way somebody deadlifts, change the way somebody overhead presses, and start to minimize the compensations so that even with the limitations they currently have, now we understand what they are, and we've got a really good plan to change those. But now that we understand where their true limitations and asymmetries are, we can help people move inside of their current boundaries so that they don't keep just blowing past some restriction that creates compensation and leads to pain. We can like shrink people's movement down just a bit. It doesn't have to change a lot, but we can avoid compensations in the spine. We can avoid compensations in the hips, the knees, and the ankles. We can avoid the compensations that we see in the shoulder. And if we can avoid those, people can start feeling better very, very quickly without quitting their movement routines. It's so much easier to solve movement problems if you continue to move and we just figure out how to do it better. It's hard to solve movement problems if you just quit moving to the point of feeling better, and then you jump right back in thinking everything's okay. Next thing you know, you're back to ground zero, back to square one. We don't want that. So we always encourage people, keep moving, do what you can, we'll figure it out. And the way we do that is by zooming out so we can figure out what's going on, zoom in on that thing. That thing is never the pain. We do not start with pain ever. And if you're listening to that thinking like, okay, whatever, that's fine. But you've probably already tried a bunch of things that zoomed in on your pain and created marginal effect, if anything at all. And that's why you're not taking it to the next level. You have to get a functional diagnosis, okay? Which means you need somebody who can identify, okay, what should the squat look and feel like? What should the deadlift look and feel like? What should the overhead press look and feel like? And we are doing that, and we're not doing that from a place of, this textbook told us how we move and we're going to force people into that. We've actually just seen thousands and thousands of clients where when they move like this, it hurts. And when we help them move like this, it doesn't. We're creating what we think is a good target for movement because we've helped people move that way pain-free over and over and over and over and over again. But first we had to understand, like, okay, what's it look like to actually look at the full body and see what that looks like? And that is creating a functional diagnosis, which is more like, hey, your squat doesn't look right. It's nothing fancy. Hey, that deadlift looks pretty wretched. We can see how that's going to lead to pain. Let us tell you how that is, okay? So what we do is first we figure out how can we make people move that feels good. Okay. Then after we do that over and over and over, we see like, okay, well, moving this way makes everybody feel good. What is going on under the hood that makes that true? Okay. What's true about like tissue planes and lines of pull and vector loads that make moving like this feel good, whereas moving like this doesn't? Okay. What's going on with the internal biomechanics of a joint that makes this type of movement feel good versus why this type of movement feels bad? And then we can start to conceptualize, okay, well, the anatomy's knit together like this, the lines of pull look like this. And so when we see this type of movement, we see these weird like vector loads and we see these weird shear forces and rotations that shouldn't be there, versus this one has a nice straight line of pull. The joint is wound up into like a biomechanical position that's very stable and nothing's pinching or encroaching on something else. And so we figured out what movements work the best first and then reverse engineered, okay, well, how does the anatomy and biomechanics support that being true? Not you move like this because we say so and because a textbook says so and because somebody else says so. It's because we've actually done the work to have people move in ways that are pain-free. We move them from pain to not pain. We move them from joint restriction to no restriction. We move them from asymmetry to symmetry. And now they feel good. Okay, well, now how can we support that with the science behind it? And it's been working very well over a very long period of time. And so just wanted to put that out in front of you today. If you're frustrated because you've got a diagnosis, what you got to know is that if you go somewhere with the diagnosis, you're going to get treatment for that diagnosis. Okay, and if that diagnosis is the source of pain, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. Good for you. But you also need to understand that source of pain is not the same as root cause. If your source of pain is a disc herniation or a disc bulge, you have to get to why did you get a disc bulge in the first place? Okay, that has to do with movement. It had nothing to do with your spine. It has to do with the way you're moving or not moving that's creating stiffness in your body over and over and over again through your lifestyle. Okay, same thing. You need to understand that you have to move away from treating an image to putting into the context. Can't tell you how many times somebody comes in, they're like, yep, got pain down my left leg. I had an MRI, I've got a disc herniation. The herniation's on the right. Okay, it's anatomically impossible. You can't have a herniation on the right that shoots pain down the left. That's just not how you're made. It's not how it works. We see that over and over and over. You can't treat an image, okay? The image has to be in the context of how's the person feeling? Does it match their symptoms? Is the mechanism of injury even there? And does it respond correctly to the things that it should respond to, right? For instance, disc herniation hurts when you bend forwards, okay? That's just the nature of how disc herniations work. It's very repeatable. It's very consistent. Nerve root impingement in the spine hurts to bend backwards because it presses more onto the nerves. It's very consistent. It's very repeatable. If you don't fit clearly into those categories, that's probably a good indicator that focusing on that's not going to take you very far. Okay. You can't treat an image. Okay. You can't treat, I'm losing disc height in my spine, and that's why my low back hurts. Okay. Research shows we're losing disc height in our spine starting at age 12 and going on out. So that's not very encouraging, but it's the truth. The research doesn't support imaging for spines. You know, it says people who get imaged early in the process of care are going to spend more money and have worse results. Lots of research on that. Truthfully, you got to be careful. When you get a diagnosis, that is going to lock you into a treatment pathway with a lot of professionals, and it might not take you where you want to go. And remember, if you stack up enough evidence of conservative care not working, physical therapy, chiropractics, meds, injections, you stack up enough evidence of those things not working, it's going to make a lot of sense to get some type of surgical correction. And I need you to make this leap mentally. If you have an image that shows disc herniation and you go get treated for disc herniation and it doesn't work, and they take you to surgery for a disc herniation, they cut that out. Now you have no disc herniation. You will be pain-free for a period of time because you're going to be on rest and restriction. When your normal life resumes and that pain comes back, your first thought is, okay, if I have a disc herniation and I got all the treatment for the disc herniation and it didn't work, it's not that the herniation was so bad that treatment wouldn't work. It's that the herniation wasn't the real problem in the first place. You were getting incorrect treatment for an incorrect diagnosis, or you were, the bare minimum, getting an incomplete treatment for an incomplete diagnosis. Okay. So you just got to be really careful. You got to find a functional diagnosis. Okay. Even if you're watching this, you're not super active in lifting weights, whatever. Those are the type of people we work best with because we can guarantee their results because we know exactly how to help these people. But at the same time, you got to understand a squat is just a name for getting up and down. Okay. How many times you get up and down out of a chair to squat? Okay. A deadlift is just a name for bending over and picking something up. Okay. Deadlift is just an easy way to learn how to do it really well. We know exactly how much it weighs. We know exactly what shape the bar is. We know exactly how it's going to move when you pick it up. And this is a lot better than dog food and mulch bags and water buckets and all the types of crazy things you could lift on your own at home. Okay. Shoulder press, overhead press, it's just a name for pushing something up over your head. Okay. Reaching into a cabinet. And if you're not getting up and down very well, if you're not bending over and picking things up very well, and if you're not reaching up over your head very well, and you're doing it with any level of frequency, those are going to create compensations and pains. You got to figure out how to move better. If you don't change the way you move, you're not going to change the way you feel. And you got to understand, pain is not a medical problem. It's a movement problem. And if movement's the problem, movement can't be the medicine. We got to go deeper than that. We got to do better than that. And, we're here to help you do it. So I'm going to drop some links down below. If you want to learn a little bit more, you can book a call with us. You just want to cruise the website. It's fine. A couple more videos there to help you navigate what you're doing. And then maybe we talked a lot about low back. So maybe even a link to some of our programs to help you just kind of self-identify and assess and resolve some of this stuff on your own for a pretty cost-effective type of deal. Ultimately, the highest order of what we do outside of just helping people, it's movement coaching. Okay. If you don't change the way you move, you won't change the way you feel. So, and also just because you increase the ability of a joint to move doesn't mean magically you're going to do that. Okay. Movement inside your brain is written as a movement file. Okay. When you say squat, you just execute. Okay. You execute on whatever pattern you currently have. And if that pattern's not correct, you're just going to keep doing it. Just because you allow the body to move better and get in better positions, it will not naturally adopt that. It's always going to default back to the path of least resistance, which is the thing it already knows. So if you mobilize, if you stretch, and then you don't move it in an intentional way to use up that new mobility immediately after with frequency and consistency, your body will discard those changes. It will go right back to where it came from. You also can't just move your way out of a joint restriction. You can sit in the bottom of a squat all day long. It's not going to change your hip joint capsule, your ankle joint capsule. You got to start with the joint, move out to the muscles, coach that into your movement. Okay. It's a systematic process, easy to follow. We can help you build a blueprint. Okay. We can show you how do you identify your joint restrictions and asymmetries. Okay. How do we do a self-keystone reset to help bring your body to baseline? Retest your joints to see, okay, what were the changes here? Now, what do I really need to zoom in on and work on so I can change my movement? We can help you coach that back into your movement. So hope you pulled some value out of this today. If you're stuck in a cycle of treatment and you can't seem to get like a real solution and real relief, okay, think about, okay, am I getting treated for my diagnosis, or somebody looking at me as a whole, figuring out what are all the things I need to change to get my movement right so that my pain and body can quit kind of freaking out through compensations, okay? You need to move towards a functional diagnosis of movement and mobility, and then work your way backwards to pain relief. Not hard to do. Happy to help you do it. See you guys later.